From Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news at 6 comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC. With the news at this time, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. A top U.S. government official is due in Guyana for talks with government, opposition, and other interest groups. A man has been charged with attempting to murder his wife. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda police are suggesting that the age limit for driving be increased. Venezuela's opposition wants the United States to link resumption of oil purchases to political concessions. And internationally, we'll be going to the BBC World Service for the latest in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Is it a special occasion? Are you on a budget but still want a filling and also mouth-watering meal? Look no further. KFC is here for you at 9 locations and 6 drive-thrus, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence, which now delivers from Shore Base to Little Diamond. Call 632-0533, 6080162, or 503-3591. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now, the news in detail. The United States Deputy Assistant Secretary for Caribbean Affairs in Haiti, Barbara Feinstein, will this week hold wide-ranging talks with the Guyana government, opposition, and the civil society. The American Embassy says she'll be visiting Guyana from March 24 to 26. Her agenda includes meetings with Vice President Barrett Jagnew, members of the opposition, the Caribbean community, CARICOM, the private sector, and the civil society. Ms. Feinstein's visit comes against the backdrop of frequent calls by American Democratic Congressmen and President Joe Biden for inclusive economic growth for all races and the preservation of democracy. The American Embassy says her visit underscores the continued importance the United States places on the U.S.-Guyanese partnership. The Guyana government is on the verge of licensing a new merchant bank that will target the rapidly emerging large business sector. Vice President Barrett Jagnew first announced the formation of the financial institution at a meeting with residents of Region 2, Pomeroon, Supinam. Governor of the Bank of Guyana, Dr. Gobel Ganga, told News Talk Radio that negotiations started about 1 year ago with the principals to set up the new merchant bank here. He says the license is being finalized and the location has been already identified. Dr. Ganga says the Bank of Guyana will be conducting an on-site inspection. Merchant banks seek to mobilize monies to invest in Guyana in various ways for large corporations. Dr. Ganga declines to confirm or deny whether United States-based Guyanese financial analyst Floyd Haynes obtained the license for the merchant bank. Mr. Haynes could not be reached immediately for comment, but well-placed sources in the local financial sector have confirmed that he has gotten the nod to set up the financial institution second only to Guyana America's Merchant Bank, a subsidiary of the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry. The central bank governor says a merchant bank requires an asset of at least $500,000. The Opposition People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, is recommending that all 10 of Guyana's administrative regions have an agricultural program to achieve self-sufficiency. PNCR leader Aubrey Norton made the recommendation in light of rising food prices. He also wants to see the government put in place agro-processing programs. The PNCR says small-scale farming must be encouraged as this will provide jobs and increase food supply. That party says the Rural Agricultural Infrastructure Development Program RAID should be revived to assist farmers to return to their lands. Meanwhile, the PNCR is also calling for grants of up to $5 million Guyana dollars per business to promote and help micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. That party says this will help new people into farming and other businesses, but also help a wide array of businesses to grow throughout the country. A man who knifed his wife several times during an argument has been charged with attempted murder. Police say 44-year-old Michael Hercules of Central Amelia's Ward, Linden, has been remanded to prison until April 3. He was charged with the offense of attempting to murder Latoya Hercules on March 20 at Bucktown, Christiansburg, West Linden. She was stabbed her chest, her lower limbs and fingers before he abandoned her. Investigators were told that a woman alerted her relatives, who rescued her and took her to the hospital. The man was subsequently arrested. Turning to news now from the region, two of Suriname's opposition parties are seeking an emergency meeting to discuss severe flooding in the interior and in the coastal plain. Star News reports that the heavy rains for more than 1 week have seen water levels rising and rivers bursting their banks. The National Democratic Party (NDP) and the Brotherhood and Unity Party (BEP) want the meeting to exchange ideas with the government in order to arrive at a structured and sustainable solution to the flooding problem. The flooding has been worsened by the decision to open all of the valves of the Afobacas Reservoir to drain excess water. But Star News reports that as a result, large parts of the interior have been flooded. The NDP and BEP political parties say that although the disaster has struck 2 weeks ago, aid has been barely trickling into certain areas and others have not received any relief. Vice President Ronnie Brunswick has informed the National Assembly that $6 million Suriname dollars has been made available to support the residents with, among other things, food and clean drinking water. The NDP and BEP, however, say that will not be sufficient. Weather forecasters and the disaster response experts predict that other parts of Suriname's coastal plain, including Paramaribo, will be flooded in the coming days. 5 United Kingdom Privy Council judges have reserved their ruling on 2 challenges against the Trinidad and Tobago public health regulations. On Wednesday, the resumption of the hearing, which began on Monday, the judges said they would take time to consider their judgment in what were important appeals. At Monday's hearing, the judges heard from attorneys representing the state and 5 men who were arrested at the guest house on April 9, 2020, and a charge on the regulations that limited gatherings to groups of no more than 5 people. On Wednesday, they also heard from the state and attorneys for Pandit Satyanand Maharaj, who challenged the regulations on the basis that a prohibition on gatherings did not apply to religious gatherings and was vague and uncertain as it criminalized breaches of the guidelines for places of worship. In September 2020, then High Court Judge Justice Ronnie Budu Singh dismissed the challenge of Dominic Suraj and the others, while partially upholding Maharaj's challenge involving the regulations over criminal sanctions for breaches related to places of worship. In April 2021, the Trinidad and Tobago Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal of the 5 men, ruling that the regulations passed under the Colonial Age Public Health Ordinance were not unconstitutional. In Antigua and Barbuda, police there are considering raising the legal driving age from 18 to 21 years. Head of the Antigua and Barbuda Police Force's Traffic Department, Assistant Superintendent Rodney Ellis, made the suggestion in the wake of numerous traffic collisions, sometimes on a daily basis. So far, 4 persons have died in the roads to date. Superintendent Ellis admits that he was opposed to the suggestion at first, but he now thinks it might be a good idea. He says that speeding plays a major factor in most of the accidents, adding that persons who recently obtained their license should not be speeding. According to Ellis, motorists between the ages of 18 and 25 are the ones involved in the more serious collisions. Meanwhile, Mr. Ellis says the Traffic Department will continue its public education drive on road safety in an attempt to reduce the number of daily collisions. Former São Paulo Governor Geraldo Alckmin joined the Brazilian Socialist Party PSB on Wednesday, taking the first step in officializing a once unimaginable union with Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as the leftist's running mate in the October election. Ackman, a centre-right political veteran who unsuccessfully ran against current far-right President Jair Bolsonaro in 2018, is expected to lure pro-business centrists to former President Lula's ticket. Lula, whose Workers' Party PT governed Brazil from 2003 to 2016, maintains a 13 to 15-point lead in early polls over Bolsonaro. Voters are angry at Bolsonaro's handling of the pandemic, rising inflation, and skyrocketing fuel prices. Those issues have played into Lula's hands and helped sand off the rough edges of his controversial legacy in Brazil. Many in Brazil still recoil at years of PT corruption as well as bribery charges that put Lula in jail until they were annulled. Addressing a cheering crowd at PSB event in Brasilia, Ackman heaped praise on his former rival. Ackman said a re-elected Lula would reduce social differences that have grown under Bolsonaro and recover Brazil's prestige on the world stage. Addressing a cheering crowd at the PSB event also, Lula's political alliance with Ackman sought to represent a stunning bout faced by the two men who ran off against each other in the 2006 election in which Lula was re-elected. During a debate at the time, Ackman said Lula's government only had two gears, stuck with the economy or accelerating in terms of scandals. But Bolsonaro's political vulnerability appears to have chilled relations between Ackman and Lula, opening up a path for a marriage of convenience. Venezuela's opposition is pressing the United States to condition any easing of oil sanctions on political concessions. Reuters news agency says this is according to the three persons who are involved in the matter. This adds new hurdles to oil companies hoping to resume operations there. The opposition, led by Juan Guaido, has been sidelined in high-level talks between the United States and Venezuela. U.S. diplomats have sought to find energy supplies worldwide that can help replace Russian oil and gas as buyers steer clear of Russia's imports over its invasion of Ukraine. U.S. officials met Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in Caracas for the first bilateral talks in years earlier this month. The Venezuelan opposition requests adds to the issues temporarily thwarting efforts by oil firms to win U.S. approvals to get access to the country's crude for unpaid debts. If accepted, the opposition's proposal will pause any consideration of U.S. imports of Venezuela's oil. Furor created by the diplomats' visit to Caracas has effectively chilled hopes for Chevron Corporation, Enispa, and Repsol to win U.S. approvals that will help them trade Venezuelan oil cargoes for billions of dollars in past debts. The opposition stance, laid out in recent meetings between U.S. State Department officials and opposition leader Juan Guaido's envoys, undercuts a faction within President Joe Biden's administration seeking a new policy towards the country with the world's largest crude reserves. And now we go to the BBC World Service for the latest bulletin of international news.
Hello, this is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. NATO is expected to boost its forces in Eastern Europe at an emergency summit on Thursday to discuss Ukraine. The head of the alliance, Jens Stoltenberg, said new battle groups would be sent to Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria and Romania to counter the threat from Russia. President Biden has already arrived in Brussels for Thursday's meeting. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, will also take part.
Tonight will mark the first month of the Russian invasion. Since the very first day, Europe has stood united, and let's continue to do so. If there's anything that Putin did not anticipate, then it's our unity, the speed of our action, and our determination.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has accused Russia's armed forces of committing war crimes in Ukraine. He said there were credible reports of indiscriminate attacks targeting civilians, something the Kremlin has denied. Wednesday has seen parts of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, coming under continued bombardment. A Russian investigative news outlet said 2 civilians died as Moscow's troops struck a residential neighbourhood. But Western observers say Ukraine's army is making some gains. Ben Brown is in the western city of Lviv.
For the first time, there are signs that Ukrainian forces are going on the offensive in this war. The Ukrainian government says its troops have now retaken the town of Makariv, west of the capital, Kyiv. Now, local authorities there are saying Ukrainian flags are flying in that town once again. Volunteers and troops in the southern town of Voznesensk have destroyed a Russian armoured convoy and pushed back Russian forces. And in Kherson, the first city to fall, Ukrainian forces are trying to recapture territory.
The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, has again warned there's an urgent need to send experts and equipment to Ukraine. Rafael Grossi said he wanted to cut the risk of a nuclear accident. Bethany Bell reports from Vienna.
Mr. Grossi said he remained gravely concerned about the situation in Ukraine. He said he hoped to work out an agreement to provide technical assistance for the safe and secure operation of Ukrainian nuclear sites, but that a positive solution had not yet been reached. We cannot afford to lose more time, he said. We need to act now. Ukraine's atomic facilities include 15 reactors, as well as Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident in 1986.
Russia says it's throwing out US diplomats in retaliation for Washington's earlier expulsion of 12 Russian representatives at the UN in New York. The number's not been publicised, nor the date by which they must leave. World News from the BBC. Madeleine Albright, the first woman to serve as US Secretary of State, has died. She was 84. She became America's top diplomat under President Bill Clinton, who described her as a force for freedom and democracy. From Washington, here's Peter Bowes.
After arriving in the United States as a refugee from Prague in 1948, Madeleine Albright rose to become one of America's most senior political figures. She was appointed U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations in 1993 and then Secretary of State in Bill Clinton's administration. A tough-talking diplomat, Madeleine Albright championed human rights, the expansion of NATO, and sought to reduce the spread of nuclear weapons. In a statement, her family said she was a tireless champion of democracy.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says a surge in violence in Colombia is worsening humanitarian conditions. It said the number of people internally displaced, injured or killed by explosives increased in 2021 to its highest level in 5 years. Dissident FARC rebels and the National Liberation Army have been fighting for control of the drug trafficking trade since the government signed a peace deal in 2016. Military sources in Yemen say a senior general has been killed in a car bomb attack in the southern port city of Aden. Major General Thabit Jawas and 4 soldiers died in the explosion. He was a commander of the Saudi-led coalition forces fighting the rebels to restore Yemen's internationally recognised government. Mackenzie Scott, the former wife of the former founder of Amazon, has donated $275 million to Planned Parenthood, a leading advocate for abortion rights in the United States. In the past 7 days, she's donated more than $1 billion, including almost $500 million to Habitat for Humanity, a group which seeks to boost affordable housing. BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
On the go and need to grab a quick bite, but tired of the same dreary food? Well, KFC is here to brighten your day with a delicious, mouth-watering meal with their 9 convenient locations: Movie Town, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Regent Street, Stabroek, Hink Street, Breedenhoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall, now open from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. And they're there to welcome you every day. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
Now, to end the news, a recap of the highlights. A top U.S. government official is due in Guyana for talks with government, opposition, and other interest groups. A man has been charged with attempting to murder his wife. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda police are suggesting that the age limit for driving be increased. Venezuela's opposition wants the United States to link resumption of oil purchases to political concessions. And internationally, Ukraine forces say they are recovering lost ground once ceded to Russia in the war. That's the end of the news, which came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
News Talk Radio Guyana for accurate information blended with great music.
The time, 18 hours 20.
For the toughest jobs, there's only one original motor oil, Valvoline, powering the world's heavy-duty engines in every corner of the world. You can trust the super protection of the original to keep your business moving forward. Valvoline, the original that never stops improving. Distributed by Swiss Machinery, Eccles Public Road. Telephone 233-3821 or 2495 or WhatsApp 691-1732.
We're now prepared to join the BBC Wireless Service in London for the remainder of the evening until Tiana Joran returns tomorrow morning with Beat the Clock. So here you are, guaranteed great international programming, not only about the war between Russia and Ukraine, but other developments in science, technology, education, the environment, and much more right here on 103.1 FM.
News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM, radio that educates and entertains.
Over now to the BBC.
Thought would be their first day back, burst into tears when they found out they would not be resuming lessons. Many had earlier talked of how happy and excited they were to be in the classroom again. We just want to be able to learn and serve our people. What is our sin? They're always talking about Islam. Does this